The Tyrannosaurusrex is perhaps the most iconic dinosaur in history. Towering at over 40 feet long with bone-crushing jaws and a thunderous presence, it ruled the imagination of generations. For most people, especially those over 40T, Rex is burned into memory as a scaly, reptilian monster forever roaring across movie screens and stomping through childhood books. But in recent years, that image has been challenged. Scientists now wonder, did T-Rex actually have feathers? Not tiny down like a chick, but real visible plumage that might have covered parts of its body. The question has stirred intense debate, not just in labs and academic papers, but in museum halls, classrooms, documentaries, and living rooms across the globe. The thought of this terrifying predator being covered, at least partially, in feathers feels like heresy to some. How could such a powerful beast resemble a bird? Could this beloved monster really be fuzzy? In this documentary, we will journey through fossil evidence, evolutionary trees, and modern science to uncover the truth. This is more than just a debate over appearance. It's a question about how science evolves and how we respond when it forces us to rethink what we thought we knew. Because when it comes to dinosaurs, the past isn't as set in stone as it once seemed. To understand the feather controversy, we have to look back at how dinosaurs were first imagined. In the early 20th century, dinosaurs were seen as sluggish, scaly reptiles, cold-blooded giants, more similar to crocodiles than to birds. This view dominated science for decades. Even when the first T-Rex fossils were discovered in 1902, artists and paleontologists alike portrayed it as a reptilian brute. The idea stuck. By the time the 1993 blockbuster Jurassic Park hit theaters, T-Rex was already a cultural icon, roaring bare-skinned, terrifying. That image was reinforced by books, museums, and toys. For many people today, especially those over 40, this version of T-Rex feels like an unquestioned truth from childhood. But starting in the 1990s and early 2000s, everything began to change. Fossils from China started revealing something unexpected: small theropod dinosaurs, close relatives of T-Rex with feather impressions. These weren't birds, they were true dinosaurs, yet covered in plumage. It was a turning point in paleontology. Suddenly, feathers weren't exclusive to birds. They were part of the dinosaur story. That's when scientists began asking a radical question. If T-Rex's cousins had feathers, could the king itself have shared that trait? It was a question that would divide experts for years to come. The strongest push toward the feathered T-Rex theory came in 2012 when a new dinosaur fossil was discovered in China. Its name was Yutyrannus huali, a large predator measuring over 30 feet long and weighing around 3,000 pounds. It wasn't T-Rex, but it belonged to the same broader family of theropods known as tyrannosauroids. And, most striking of all, it had feathers. Not just a few patches, but long filamentous feathers across much of its body. This discovery changed the game. Until then, most feathered dinosaurs were small bird-like species. Scientists believed that large predators like T-Rex wouldn't need feathers. Perhaps they were too big to require insulation, but Yutyrannus proved otherwise. If such a massive creature had feather size alone, could no longer rule them out. That raised a big question. If a close cousin like Yutyrannus had them, why not T-Rex? The climates they lived in were different. Yes, Yutyrannus lived in a colder environment, but that didn't explain everything. Some experts argued the feathers could have served other purposes, like display or intimidation. Suddenly, the image of a scaly king was no longer untouchable. The idea of a feathered apex predator wasn't just possible, it was becoming plausible. As fossil evidence grew, scientists turned their attention to the most direct source, the actual remains of T-Rex. Several specimens, particularly from Montana and South Dakota, included fossilized skin impressions. These impressions came from parts of the tail, hips, and neck. What they revealed was intriguing, scaly, pebbly textures, much like those found on modern reptiles. To some researchers, this was enough to settle the debate. If the skin showed scales and no feathers, then T-Rex was clearly scaly. Case closed. But others weren't convinced. These skin patches only represented a tiny portion of the animal's overall surface, maybe 1 or 2% at best. That left 98% of the body undocumented, and feather impressions are notoriously difficult to preserve. They require unique fossil conditions, fine sediments, low oxygen, and rapid burial conditions not typical in North America, where most T-Rex fossils are found. This raised a possibility: could T-Rex have had both? Perhaps it had scaly skin on its legs and tail, but thin bristles or proto-feathers on its back, neck, or arms. After all, many modern birds, descendants of dinosaurs, have bare legs and scaled feet, but feathers elsewhere. The fossil record was incomplete, and scientists knew it. The debate was far from over. Another key to the mystery lies in understanding T-Rex's biology. This was no ordinary animal. It was massive, weighing up to 9 tons. In biology, size matters. Large animals generate and retain heat more efficiently than small ones, a concept known as gigantothermy or thermal inertia. This led some scientists to argue that adult T-Rexes may not have needed feathers for insulation. Their bulk alone kept them warm. But what about juveniles, young T? Rexes newly hatched and vulnerable wouldn't have had that same advantage. Some researchers believe they may have been covered in a soft coat of feathers, or down which they gradually shed as they grew. This idea isn't far-fetched. Modern animals like elephants and rhinos are born with more hair than they keep as adults. Crocodiles, birds, even mammals all show similar shifts in skin covering as they age. Another possibility is that feathers, if present, weren't for warmth at all. They could have served as display features, helping individuals attract mates, intimidate rivals, or even signal social status. Brightly colored crests, patches of bristles, or shaggy arms aren't just science fiction. They're all within the realm of biological plausibility. The more we study T-Rex, the more it looks like nature had room for feathers. To understand whether T-Rex had feathers, we must also explore its evolutionary family. T-Rex belonged to a group called coelurosaurs, which includes many feathered dinosaurs and all modern birds. From tiny raptors like Microraptor to larger species like Yutyrannus feathers appear throughout this lineage. The pattern is clear. Feathers likely evolved early in coelurosaur evolution and were passed down. Some species retained them, others lost them over time. So where does T-Rex fit? Its closest known relatives, such as Dilong and Guanlong, both had feather-like filaments. These weren't for flight, they were likely for insulation or display. This suggests that feather traits may have been inherited at least in early stages of T-Rex's development. But as it grew larger, those traits may have diminished. It's similar to how whales once had legs, or how ostriches lost flight. Evolution isn't a straight line, it's full of adaptations and trade-offs. Scientists continue to debate whether T-Rex retained any feathers as an adult, but few dispute that its ancestors had them. This evolutionary context doesn't prove T-Rex had feathers, but it builds a strong case. It places feathers in the family story, possibly skipped in adulthood, but written in its genetic past. Beyond biology and fossils, behavior offers new angles. In many modern animals, external features like feathers, fur, or skin color aren't just about insulation. They play critical roles in communication, courtship, and intimidation. Birds especially use feathers to express dominance, attract mates, and signal health. Could T-Rex have done something similar? If even small feather patches existed on the arm's neck or spine, they might have served more than one purpose. A ridge of stiff bristles could flare up during displays like a lion's mane. Feathers might not have covered the entire body, but could still have made an impact. And even if they weren't visible in adults, juvenile T-Rexes might have relied on feather-based cues to interact with others in their social group. Some paleontologists propose that baby tyrannosaurs stayed near their parents, learning and mimicking behaviors. If so, visual features like feathers could have helped with recognition and bonding. These ideas are speculative but grounded in modern biology. Evolution often recycles ideas, it rarely throws things away completely. If feathers helped early coelurosaurs survive and communicate, it's likely some of those advantages lingered in T-Rex. Feathers in this case aren't just about science, they're about personality, expression, and even prehistoric drama. As scientific theories evolved, museums and media faced a dilemma: stick with tradition or embrace the new evidence. For decades, T-Rex had been the scaly icon of power. Visitors expected to see a terrifying reptilian giant, not a dinosaur with fluff. Changing that image risked confusing the public or even provoking backlash. But some museums chose to update their displays. They added signage models and exhibits explaining the feather debate. Others took a bolder step, commissioning sculptures of feathered tyrannosaurs, sometimes showing juvenile versions with visible fuzz. These decisions weren't just cosmetic, they reflected a growing desire to show science in progress. Meanwhile, popular culture held firm. Movies, toys, and video games mostly continued showing the classic T-Rex, bare-skinned and roaring. Filmmakers worried that a feathered version would seem silly or less threatening. But science communicators pushed back. They argued that feathered predators could be just as intimidating, maybe even more so. Imagine a giant animal with dark plumage, gleaming eyes, and a crest that flares up in rage. That's not goofy. That's terrifying. Slowly, the public began to accept the possibility. Not everyone agreed, but people were talking. The debate itself became part of the T-Rex legend. The king of dinosaurs was evolving again. The feathered debate also raises a deeper question: how do we handle change in science? For many people, especially those who grew up with a certain version of T-Rex, the idea of a feathered predator feels like rewriting history. But science isn't static. It grows, adapts, and often corrects itself. That's not weakness, that's its greatest strength. The story of T-Rex is a perfect example. Once thought to be cold-blooded and sluggish, it's now understood as an active, intelligent predator. If we accepted that shift, why not this one? The resistance isn't always about facts, it's emotional. Changing T-Rex changes something personal: childhood wonder, cinematic memories, favorite books. But those feelings don't make the science wrong. They just show how powerful dinosaurs are in our imagination. In schools, educators now teach both perspectives: the traditional view and the evolving one. This encourages curiosity, not just memorization. Students learn to ask questions, weigh evidence, and accept uncertainty. Because the truth is, we may never get a perfect answer, but the pursuit itself has value. T-Rex teaches us that science is a living process. It's not about being right all the time. It's about daring to ask what might be true, even if it surprises us. So did T-Rex really have feathers? The honest answer: we still don't know for sure, but the evidence suggests it's possible, maybe even likely, in some form. It could have had feathers as a juvenile, shedding them as it matured. Or perhaps certain parts of its body, like the arm's neck or spine, carried bristles or proto-feathers. What we do know is this: its close relatives had feathers, and feathers served multiple purposes beyond flight. They weren't just for warmth, they signaled, displayed, and intimidated. If even a hint of that legacy remained in T-Rex, then the creature we thought we knew might have been more complex, more dramatic, and maybe even more terrifying than the lizard-like monster we imagined. For those who grew up with the classic image, it's not easy to let go. But we don't have to. Science isn't about replacing the old, it's about expanding the story. The scaly T-Rex isn't wrong, it's just incomplete. And that's the heart of discovery, knowing there's always more to learn. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this episode challenged what you thought you knew, let us know in the comments. Like, subscribe, and stay curious, because the next fossil might change everything.